Hello everyone, welcome to another weekly episode of Inking Out Loud. I'm your host, Rob Santos, and I'm joined by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And once again, we have our sound engineer, Pat McCaffrey. Pat, what's up, man?
In the house.
And we're going to spend episode 58, that's the episode number today. We're going to be wrapping up our read of Robert Jordan's Knife of Dreams, the 11th volume in the Wheel of Time series. So, without anything further ado, at the moment, on my end, Drew, tell us what went down.
Okay, so we pick up with a bang. We start off with Nynaeve tricking Lan into crossing the borderlands and then traveling ahead of him to rally the survivors of Malkier in one of the greatest scenes Robert Jordan ever wrote. And then we go from there to brief chapters with Rand revisiting Tyr, and then with the Sea Folk. And we find out that the Amayar have committed mass suicide in the wake of the cleansing, which we'll talk about again in a little bit.
Yeah, they know how to party. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And then we move to Egwene, her one full chapter in the book, Honey in the Tea, where she is demoted to a novice in the White Tower, dosed with forkroot, and she begins her work undermining Elida from inside the tower. We move from there back to Matt, very briefly, where Matt reconnects with Talmanes and the Band of the Red Hand. And then it's back to Perrin and Fail, where Perrin finally attacks the Shido, and Fail is finally rescued.
Finally, yeah.
And then moving from there, we go to Elaine, where she finally breaks the siege and finally gets the support to become Queen of Andor and win the Succession War.
Finally.
Yeah.
Then we stop in briefly with Furyk Karede as he is hunting down Tuon. And then Matt and Tuon get married. Matt lets Tuon go back to Ebudar with Furyk Karede and fights a battle. And then we get a chilling epilogue where Pavara and the Red Sisters arrive at the Black Tower to negotiate the bonding of Ashaman. And we are left with Mazrim Taim saying, "Let the Lord of Chaos rule." And that's the end of the last book that Robert Jordan wrote for the Wheel of Time.
Chilling, but I wouldn't say surprising at this point, because Taim's been a sketchy son of a bitch up through everything we've seen him at this point. Even when we first met him, he's still sketchy as hell. I didn't even think to write any notes about Taim. I do want to discuss Taim later. Remind me of that.
He is introduced in mystery and then wrapped in layers of a sinister garb. Mm-hmm. And this is the donning the sinister crown.
Well, I vividly remember when this book first came out and getting that scene in Taim's palace and how everything is red and black. And he says, "Let the Lord of Chaos rule." And so many people were freaking out, being like, wait, is Taim Moradin?
Well, those are standing orders. Come on now.
But they're the red and black colors there, which are Moradin's colors. And so, of course, he's not Moradin, but that was a common theory in the feverish weeks after this book came out.
I think I remember retorting, though, that, we know that Moradin has two servants who also wear his colors, right? That doesn't necessarily mean he has to be Moradin. I did find that a little unfeasible at first. I didn't understand
I will push back on that. Taim does not wear the colors. The colors decorate his palace.
Okay,
but
fair enough.
Wears a black coat with blue and gold dragons on the sleeves.
Black and blue. Okay, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. Huh. So, I think we should jump right into style, though, before we go further down the Taim
Swan
route.
dive right into that one for sure. Should we talk about pacing? That's probably going to take up the most of our style discussions here. Drew, start us off. How did you feel about the pacing of this book and how it compares likely favorably
it's breakneck.
to Crossroads of
breakneck. It makes sense, and the way Robert Jordan was able to make this happen, make this book so exciting, and just one thing after another, is because Crossroads was all set up for it. all of the exposition and rising action for these plot lines happens in Crossroads, basically. And then all the climaxes are in Knife of Dreams. And the result of that is, as we talked about on our Crossroads episode, maybe a flawed book there, but Knife of Dreams resultingly is just full of fireworks.
It's explosive. Really?
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. It's one that I read a hell of a lot more than anything else in the 7 through 11, I should say 8 through 11 cycle. Knife of Dreams had some of my favorite moments for Rand in the entire series. Oh my god, it was so cool. But it's rewarding seeing Rand telling his vassals, finally saying, it's time. The last battle is imminent. Begin your preparations. We march to Sheol Ghul. That's just oh man, 13, 14, 15-year-old Rob is reading that and just pumping himself up in his chair, and he's getting so excited. I love the pacing.
I will also add, I don't know how I forgot to mention this in my recap, but Rand lost his hand.
Yeah. You also forgot to mention that Matt is officially married now.
Oh, I said that.
Did you?
You did.
I must have. Oh my god! Look at me feeling like an asshole. Okay, but yeah, Rand has lost his hand. That's some crazy stuff. Kind of gives a whole lot more meaning to that prophecy we got in book 2 as well. The dark prophecy: which hand shelters and which hand slays. Right?
Ooh, yeah, I like that connection. Yeah.
Really? Did you not really consider that before? Wow.
And the hand that shelters is the hand that got blown off.
Because Rand thinks at one point, he goes, which one is it that he had lost?
Yeah, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I love that. I love all that imagery.
I totally missed that, but well, thank you for pointing that out.
No problem, man. I'm glad I could do it for once, coming from me instead of actually learning something.
Well, that's what you get when you read the Wheel of Time, because of all the convolutions.
Yeah, and as an aside, I really want to write a metal track now. Pat, you'll definitely be on track with this. I want to write a metal track called To Sheol Ghul. How freaking cool would that be, man? Or maybe just into Sheol Ghul itself, or To Sheol Ghul itself. Who is it that just consistently... Was that Darlin that said that? To Sheol Ghul itself?
Oh, yeah, I think
that's getting on my nerves now.
It's in the... Yeah, I think you're right. It's in that chapter.
That does sound like Darlin.
Something he would say for sure.
Yeah, when Rand goes back into the stone.
As an aside, Rob, I have made several attempts at writing Wheel of Time metal songs. Haven't really come to fruition yet, but it's still very much on my to-do list.
I've got 10 or 15 different riffs that I want to apply to Wheel of Time, something that I never got around to actually constructing whole songs for. Because I can't drum for shit. I can't drum at all. I'm just a guitar player. But so are you, right?
Oh, yeah. But I have a guy.
Oh, you have a guy. Oh, for my future visit, we're going to have to write this metal track, man.
Hell yeah, man. Let's do it. And
if only we could find somebody to mix and master it, eh? Sorry, Drew.
If only.
Drew sounds like he's chomping at the bit here. What's up?
No, I was just kind of amused by your little side discussion here.
Yeah, I thought you had found what you were looking for.
No, I'm just trying to flip through quickly, but I haven't found the exact quote.
So this is
not the biggest deal in the world.
Yeah. But you know the sentiment I'm trying to get across. I just love that line. I love how it ends the scene. I just love everything. I love the momentum that it's building. It's just, oh my god, I was so ready for The Gathering Storm when it came out. Really rewarding.
Speaking of, as part of our style discussion, I wanted to mention that, while a lot of things are climaxing in this book, the fact that they're climaxing is by itself setting up even more.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, that's the way to do it.
It's the fallout, the consequences of each of the major climaxes here are situations which bolster the forces of the light, where Elaine finally, concludes her succession war, but that means that Rand now has Andor united and ready to fight by his side. Matt finally gets married to Tuon, and the result of that is, Rand now has one of his best friends and a Taviran married and has that link to the ever-victorious army. And then Perrin finally rescues Fael, and the result of that, of course, the Shador dispersed, but Perrin's army has swelled in size.
Yeah.
And so, and that, of course, lays the very first building block for the rest of Perrin's kind of character arc up through Gathering Storm and Towers of Midnight. So it's really deftly done how these are long-awaited climactic moments, and yet they're not just like a hard stop. They open up further doorways for story.
It really does feel that they have finally gotten some annoying chores out of the way, and now the real work has begun.
Yeah.
Especially with Elaine. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
For the reasons we've beaten to death, that we need not go into again.
Well, I might go into it a little more later in this episode, but who knows?
Yeah, this is definitely...
Oh, I don't plan to not riff on that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely a major character point to discuss.
Before we leave our style discussions, though, there's still something else I want to talk about, and that's the lack of anything even resembling humor in Rand's points of view now. Because, like, I mean, we can be honest, there hasn't been much for a couple of books now, but the other characters still have seemed, content to crack jokes in his presence, There's none of that here. Not anymore. And I'd originally saved this talking point for my character discussion on Rand for this episode, but I think this particular point still belongs in our style discussion because I want us to think about Jordan's approach to writing his main character here. And I wrote down, any reader knows that to have a sympathetic protagonist, they need to have motivations. They need to have desires. It makes them human. Any writer knows that to have a functional character, they need to have flaws to balance their virtues. But in Jordan's case, he's demonstrated it takes a master to write a main character without any apparent desires, with no ability to laugh, no ability to enjoy themselves, and still make us enjoy reading them. And I wanted to ask how you felt, both of you, Drew and Pat, about Jordan taking away like even something as simple as basic humor from such a prominent character and what he did to balance it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, and not one I had considered before, because even while Rand gets harder and harder over, the kind of middle portion of this series, we do still have brief moments where Rand will crack a joke, and the people around him are like, kind of discombobulated by it.
That's a joke for us.
Yeah, and then of course there's the vintage scene in Lord of Chaos where he's trying to explain humor to the Aiel and things like that. But as you're right, as we get into this book, there's just none of that there. Rand is all business all the time, and he's so busy worrying about the last battle, worrying about Luz Theron, worrying about losing control, that he doesn't have time to even consider like being offhandedly sarcastic or something like that.
Yeah, well, even more than that, it's how it affects everybody around him as well, because he was getting pretty moody and pretty dark through book 7, book 8, book 9, and book 10. But during those books, at least everyone else, especially Min, was still trying to make him laugh, was still cracking jokes and seeing if it would get a response, and he was just deadpanning it the whole time. But now we're at the point where even everybody else is starting to get dragged down by this aura, this kind of weight behind everything he does, and how he just has no patience for it. It kind of breaks my heart that everybody in his vicinity is also being affected by this too. It sucks.
It's the aftermath of the events of Winter's Heart, really, is what we're seeing.
What, you mean like his imprisonment in Farmadding?
His imprisonment and the cleansing. Like, the cleansing as an ordeal, let's say.
Okay, you'd think he'd be in a better mood after that, though, right? Like, crack another joke that morning or something, Like, walk with a spring in his step.
There was also the imprisonment.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the imprisonment, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Farmadding did a number on him, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would have hoped that cleansing the male half of the source and writing that mistake that he made in his hubris 3,000 years previously and broke the world with, that might have been like maybe something to balance being in prison for a couple days.
I mean, logically, yes.
That's not how Rand
No, it's not. He's so fatalistic,
anymore,
and that's what bums me out,
So... but I think this is a good segue into character discussion here.
I agree.
Because this book gives us another major point, well, really two, to further Rand's fatalistic tendencies and set up the Rand that we're going to get at his darkest in the next book.
Yeah.
And those two are when he, quote-unquote, loses control of Saidin to Luz Theron. during the Manor battle in Vows, and his memories of Lews Therin are directing his weaves, and it's an awesome battle scene. You know, just one of those moments in the Wheel of Time that I can't wait to see on the big screen.
Let's get chills about it.
Or the small screen, rather.
The screen.
Yeah, the screen.
I'll probably watch it on a 5-inch screen on my Galaxy S8. Yeah.
I have a pretty big screen at home that I'll be watching it on, but
I might buy a screen for that shit.
but so while it's reminiscent of Dumai's Wells in a way, where it's this really awesome, you know, Brandon Sanderson's zeroth law, err on the side of awesome, rule of cool, whatever moment that people fixate on. But like Dumai's Wells, it has an undercurrent of something really, really bad happening at the same time, and it's easy to lose sight of that with all the fireworks going on, where you're like, oh, that's so cool, blossoms of fire, death gates, awesome, you know, they just killed 100,000 Trollocs in like 20 minutes, oh, it's so great. And then you realize, like, what does this mean for Rand's psyche, that he has for the first time felt like he lost control to Lews Therin, that Lews Therin was the one who seized Saidin and not him,
right?
You know,
and then on top of that, he loses a hand in an act of treachery,
exactly,
where he had optimistic and he had hopes.
And even more than that, he loses his hand because of Min.
Yeah.
Because he has to protect her.
Yeah.
And that just, like, it's another nail in that coffin for how Rand is acting to and around other people. Like, that he's recognizing this is a seriously major fatal flaw that I have.
Yeah.
And, of course, it would have been smart if he had just been like, no, you're not coming with me. End of story. But
would have been smart if she knew that she shouldn't insist on coming where she doesn't belong. But
yeah. And this scene, you know, we could go back all the way like to the beginning of our episodes, Rob. If you remember that I said I didn't like Min, and this scene is a major part of it. Yeah, she over the last couple of books, she hasn't made much of a perceivable difference in Rand's mental state, and here she is the cause of Rand losing his hand. So it's like...
And she's
come on. Semirog is the reason Rand lost his hand. You can't blame Min for that.
But Rand... Yeah, but he could have dodged it if Min had not been there.
But the fact you put that on Min before Semiraj is like... What?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying like Min is the one who
maybe I'm kind of jumping the gun on that one. Sorry, go continue. It sounded like Pat was going to jump in there. I didn't mean to cut him off.
But...
Well, Drew and I speak with one voice as far as this issue is concerned.
Mm-hmm. So what did Min do wrong?
She insisted
on going in a situation that she had no business being in.
Yeah. Well, she could have
because of her presence
viewings,
there,
perhaps. Like,
here's the thing.
That same logic, what business does she have with his meetings with the Aes Sedai and Lord of Chaos?
None. Min is completely useless, and her viewings are completely useless because what she sees is going to happen anyway. There is no changing it, as has been established. So whether she sees it or not, or whether the reader knows about it or not, all of the stuff is going to happen. It's just reading the book, you know?
We got a lot more philosophical about Min than I expected to get. That's a good point, though. That is a good point.
She is written, and she's in the book in the first place to tease the reader with things, which is fine as far as it goes. It doesn't warrant a place.
She will eventually find a use in another couple of books here. But
but even that has the same problems that
I
just mentioned.
The scholar part, where she's the one who figures out exactly what Kalendor is. But you know, like that's like a true use as a character, like having utility that's reserved for like books 12, 13, and 14 at the end of a 14-book series. You know, and so like I get that people argue in her favor because she's like, oh, she's the one who humanizes Rand. She's the one who treats Rand like the uncouth shepherd.
I've made that same statement before myself, yeah.
But there's no perceivable effect for like there's no real good that comes out of that for Rand's mental state. He continues to go downhill despite that. It's like like maybe there was a mitigating factor. I don't know. Like you could argue that he would have gone downhill faster or harder had she not been around.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's tough for me to see much value in Min as a character in this series. And then that's not to go into the fact that I don't like her personality,
right.
But
but it is the last. Min is the last vestige that he doesn't really give up on enjoying certain things. Like they're still intimate, I gather.
Very clearly in this book.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Matt's
did I miss something?
Matt keeps like every time he thinks of Rand and Min are going at it.
Oh damn.
Yeah.
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 Like one of the first times he sees the colors, Rand and Min are like naked making out next to a bed, and Matt's like,
that would happen. Oh god. Matt.
See, that's one of those ultimate nightmare scenarios. It's like, don't think about pink elephants.
Yeah.
How do you? Oh man, that poor man. But then again, it's probably you got to be saying the same thing for those who are bonded to him as well, like Alana, like Elaine.
Well, she can at least mask the bond.
Yeah,
but you also like I love what you brought up, Rob, about like the jokes, and because that's one of the threads that tie into this subtle undercurrent of what's going on with Rand, and it's not just the jokes. Like there'll be scenes in other books where Rand is enjoying a pipe or a drink or a meal.
Yeah. You know, I hadn't even considered that. I was just talking about humor
Rand.
myself, but that's a good point.
Well, and Jordan and Tolkien, incidentally, really use things like that to ground the world and to give a sense of goodness and rightness, that people can enjoy these simple things, and to establish that over many, many books and then just slowly start eroding it.
Yeah, and I think to that point, this is a great thing to bring up, which again I hadn't even considered, the like overarching thematic importance of this. Things like wine, simple pleasures, a wine, an ale, a pipe, a good meal, a hearty homemade meal, are becoming harder and harder to acquire in the world because things are spoiling.
Yeah.
And that is tied back to Rand and his like emotional and spiritual state, because the dragon is one with the land.
Yep.
So it's this, recursive cycle where the worse Rand gets, the worse the world gets, and the fewer things there are for Rand to appreciate, and the worse he gets, and so on and so forth.
No, absolutely.
And you get the vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and like things are, and on top of that, things are really starting to fall apart for Rand at this point in the series. In stark contrast to certain sequences that we loved in the last three books, particularly in my case in Crown of Swords. Yeah. He finds out, first off, pardon me, that Weirmon and Anayela are 1,000 miles from where they're supposed to be.
Yep.
And they've bungled his negotiations with the rebels in Tyr. He learns that, on the other hand, we have Cinnamon and Tolmeran and a whole bunch of others that are up to a lot of the same, just leaving their responsibilities behind in Ilion. The Borderlanders are still not guarding the Blight. The Black Tower is now too dangerous for him to visit. And it's like, in light of all this, or if you'll forgive the expression, the lack thereof in all of this, it's no wonder that Rand has no time for bullshit, like having fun. In any sense of the word.
Yeah.
So depressing.
The weight of power. And it's another theme is that he's getting more and more powerful all the time.
But he's struggling with that power, of course. It's, because as he loses trust, this is something we talked about, I think, in Lord of Chaos and A Crown of Swords, where Rand is starting to learn to delegate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And here we're seeing him, like, in this awful middle ground where he doesn't have anybody close to him that he trusts enough to delegate, but he has to because he can't do anything himself. And the result is his lieutenants are shirking their responsibilities and things are falling apart because of it.
For certain reasons.
Yeah, I mean, Weirmon and Anayela specifically. But... and I just want to put out like another Weirmon appreciation moment. Like
a Weirmon appreciation.
He's a great
moment?
dark friend. Like
he's a great dark friend.
Until that moment in Towers of Midnight when you like see his true colors, I was so exhausted every time Weiramon showed up on the page because he's blindingly incompetent.
Yeah.
He's so stupid. He's so arrogant and like smarmy and all of this that like
that wasn't a word I was prepared to hear today.
Oh, like can't stand him, and then you see him like as soon as the game is up. He just changes completely and you're like, oh, that was all an act, and what a great act it was. He went the whole time without Rand suspecting that he was purposely being incompetent to screw up Rand's plans.
Do you mean that you didn't know Weiramon was a Dark Friend
No,
until Towers of Midnight?
No, we did.
Okay, I was like,
so
whoa,
we first find out, or we're at least given a hint that he's a Dark Friend in the Path of Daggers when he's talking with Getwin.
That's a big hint. Because the mask is off at that point.
Yes. Yeah, but it's off, but it's off in a way that you can still justify it with the way you understand Weiramon's character of this like arrogant kind of jerk.
Fool. Yeah.
But like, man, what a clever act!
Yeah,
what a clever act that he could have screwed up so much. He almost got Rand killed in the Path of Daggers.
Credit where credit is due. Am I right?
You know,
yeah. Is that your point that you're making here?
Yeah, like.
Yeah. Hard to argue with.
I don't know. He's low key one of the most effective Dark Friends in the series.
Oh yeah. If the rest of the Dark Friends had been 1/10 as competent, the Light would never have stood a chance.
Like consider how many thousands of Rand's soldiers Weiramon got killed attacking Ilion on his own, ignoring Rand's orders to hold, and he just like, no, I'm gonna go take these border forts. And Samuel slaughters them all.
Yeah, and still to keep that balance going for long enough that Rand doesn't just immediately execute him out of frustration. Like that's a delicate balance to walk when you're dealing with the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah,
right. You know what? I hadn't really considered him in that light. I still consider him as a fool in a lot of ways, but when you put it this way, it's really hard not to agree. It really is. Like you make a fantastic point. Weiramon is. Smart.
He's a smart dude.
Well, a lot of his arrogance, especially as far as the Aiel concerned, is not feigned at all.
Oh yeah, that is true.
So it's partially an act, and partially just who he is.
Yeah.
And it just happens to complement itself so well.
Precisely.
Yeah, and he is emblematic of Rand's problem with delegation, because like Rand doesn't really have many other options, right? So he has to trust a guy who is a completely, at least on the surface, incompetent fool.
Yeah.
And beneath the surface, actively serving Rand's enemies.
Yes. So, are we done with our Rand discussion? Is there anything else about Rand al'Thor that we want to talk about before we get to the Gathering Storm? Or
I have one more thing, and that is Rand no longer has Lan now. And this is where we see Rand really start to take a sharp nosedive. If you remember earlier in our episodes, I brought up the fact that Lan is a bit of a father stand-in for Rand. And now Rand is at like a key moment with his like mental, emotional balance. And having a steadying authority presence, a guide stone, so to speak, in Lan, taken away from him, helps accelerate that.
I agree. I think he certainly needs that more than he needs to get laid.
Think about how different things might have been in the Gathering Storm, especially with some of the choices and the affectations Rand takes on if Lan were there. Lan doesn't even need to say anything. And Rand sees Lan's judgment and realizes, oh, I'm being an idiot at certain points in this series. And so, like, without that kind of reining in, steadying presence going forward, Rand becomes much more unstable.
You know, I don't think it's always a steadying presence, though, or a positive influence. Not always, because there was also a distinct moment in Winter's Heart when Rand and Lan are kind of butting heads as Rand shows up with, and it meets Nynaeve and Lan. And Nynaeve, I think it's from Nynaeve's point of view, she's aware that there's a tension in the room between Rand and Lan, and they're kind of eyeballing one another, realizing that, hey, you're not the person I thought you were, and you are more dangerous than you really should be. And Rand is just kind of like, yeah, sorry, man. Like, he just kind of accepts it and fatalistically, we keep beating that word into the ground, but I'll say it again. Rand just kind of accepts it. I don't think Lan is 100% of the time a positive. And it's through no fault of Lan's. Rand is just being arrogant. He is.
I'm not saying Lan is like some panacea where like he is the cure to all of Rand's ills, but he is a steadying presence in Rand's life, and having that taken away, I mean, like, steady is just the word for Lan. Right, like
I would argue it's the word for Tam, which who fills in the exact same thing that Rand needs later in the Gallery Storm as well.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Is like when Rand lost that steadiness of Tam, leaving the two rivers, Lan became that fill-in, that surrogate father, that rock for Rand.
Fair enough.
And then and so, and we see some of Rand's most unstable moments in the middle of the series when Lan isn't there in A Crown of Swords, and then Lan comes back. And Rand chills out at the manor house,
Yeah.
And then Lan leaves, and Rand starts going downhill again.
And then Natron's Barrow happens.
The scene that you brought up, Rob, where like they acknowledge the possibility of violence between them, is a thing that subconsciously happens between males all the time.
Women don't realize that.
And it serves a useful purpose. It's like,
at least a lot of
look,
it's
like
they all don't.
It creates this atmosphere where, like, all right, there are certain things that will not be tolerated, otherwise violence will ensue. And that's one of the reasons why we can have society. Because we agree that certain things are not done, and there is an implicit threat of force behind that. And like, so I could see that having an effect on Rand, albeit subconsciously. Because Lan is no match for Rand.
What happened in that scene is Nynaeve picked
up fight
on that signal that all men are constantly sending out to one another on a frequency consistently all the time.
But so that was my last point on Rand. Let's move to Perrin.
Okay, so while you guys start discussing Perrin, I'm just going to go pour another drink. Kick us off. I'll be back in 15-20 seconds.
Okay, so this is finally, I mean, we're going to use the word finally a lot in this episode. Perrin sort of overcoming his inertia, his emotional inertia, as well as his physical inertia, and moving, making decisions and acting upon them. Like, one of the things I brought up earlier in Winter's Heart was that Perrin doesn't have a whole lot of agency, and that's why his chapters are frustrating.
Yeah.
It's the other people around him are making decisions and acting upon information, and he's stuck, like, floundering, essentially.
Yeah.
Here, he has taken control, and he has agency again.
Right.
He's the one calling the shots. And it was partially due to Berlane making the choice to say, like, I'm willing to put this thing on hold until we have Fail back. Although she still does some underhanded things because that's Berlane, but she cedes a lot of authority and a lot of agency to Perrin, and the result is that Perrin, as much as he likes to say, that he's a slow-moving guy, a contemplative person.
Slow-thoughted.
Once he gets that agency back, he moves pretty fast. He makes the decision to go to Sohabor at the end of Crossroads of Twilight. He makes the decision to meet with the Stranchan. He makes the decision to lay out the battle plan. Like, he's calling a lot of the shots in this book, especially, and the result is finally, the dispersal of the Shido and the Fail breaking out at the same time as Perrin opens an avenue for her to fully escape.
Now, I don't know if the positive effect that Berlane's actions are intentional on her part, but she understands that people are looking to Perrin for leadership, and he is actually responsible for a great number of people, although he doesn't want it. And she knows that just telling him, look, you have to do this because these people are relying on you, isn't going to work.
Yep.
So she kind of nudges certain decisions.
Yeah, Berlane is an intelligent woman. I mean, she knows how to play the game, and she also knows when to cede importance to things that are greater than her own desires.
Yeah.
Because that is something she's been dealing with as the ruler of Mayene, basically her whole life.
Yeah, I have nothing against Berylane.
I mean, I have some things
Oh,
against
come on. I mean, there's a few things that I have against Berylane.
She is actively trying to ruin a marriage. So...
Yeah, well...
She's being actively
Perrin didn't-
dishonest and making everyone think that he's being unfaithful. Like, that's pretty low.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she was interested in Perrin before he was married, so...
Oh, that justifies it. Sorry, never mind.
He was still in a relationship.
I'm kidding.
No, but...
Maybe I just like the fantasy of putting myself in Perrin's shoes and having Berylane come after me. Can I not have this? Can I not have this one thing?
But I will say it's like it was in this book really that, and maybe a little bit in the latter half of Crossroads of Twilight, that I started to appreciate Berylane because she became more than just the jealous love triangle counterpart for Fael. Like her character started acting in different ways and having different effects on the plot and the story. Mm-hmm. And it was then that you get more than just the little hints from Lord of Chaos and Crown of Swords when you find out Ruark really respects her and the Wise Ones like her. Mm-hmm. Where you're like, okay, that's a signifier that there's something of substance here.
Yeah.
But here we see that spelled out right on the page. We see it in action.
Quite.
Yeah, and so I like that. And the result is Perrin finally regains his agency and becomes a much easier character to read.
And
I just hate how Fael represents that agency. It's like, oh god, he has none without her.
Mm-hmm.
And to the theme that where things climax here in this book, they just begin the next set of problems for Perrin. That's okay, he got his goal done, and now he just wants to quit.
Right. Yeah, he needs to find his motivation again to continue using that agency.
Right.
Even though his natural inclination is to just chill out and spend time on his personal things.
So we, as readers, can safely assert that if the whole kidnapping of with the Shido did not happen, Perrin probably would never have had the need to let's say man up, so to speak, and get things done before it was too late.
That's
an interesting argument. Postulation there. That's actually a really good thought experiment. I'd like to revisit that when I have more time to consider my answer. Would he? I think I have a little more faith in Perrin than that. Contrary to what I just said about him having absolutely no agency without Fael.
I mean, things certainly would have gone very differently had Perrin arrived in Altara or Gil'dan and collected Massima, opened a gateway back to Cairhien, and delivered him to Rand.
I still, that's one of my points of contention against Perrin. I don't know why he didn't press the issue. I'm sorry, dude, but if
because that's not Perrin, right? And that's kind of the point of what we're saying is that.
But torturing Aiel and cutting off their limbs is Perrin. I don't.
It's the wolf side of Perrin.
Yeah. And that was, of course, a very important moment for his development where he recognized his, his dependence on violence as an easy out. Whereas, if he had done that with Massima, it wouldn't have been so extreme that he would have recognized the folly of it and how he has this character flaw that he needs to address. And,
It was immediately following that scene, that torture scene where he did throw away the axe, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
so there's still something accomplished there.
Basically, he found he enjoyed it. He found he wasn't sickened by what he did and realized, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? And remembered Elias saying, when you start to like it, that's when you'll throw it away.
I take a little bit of what I just said back. When I just said that he has absolutely no agency without Fael. He did demonstrate in that moment, without Fael, that he was still able to make a conscious decision about the kind of man that he wants to be. Okay, I do acknowledge and accept that. Yep.
And that's what I was saying with Perrin in Knife of Dreams, is that he regains agency in this book. where he's the one calling the shots for his army. He's the one who goes out and says, yes, we're going to meet with the Shanshan. Yes, we're going to use these resources. Here's how we're going to plan this battle. Here's what we're going to do.
Oh,
and he is finally grasping that leadership and that agency and acting upon it.
I thought you meant he gets his agency back when Fail gets back. You mean he took agency back to get her back. He just had to hike up his sleeves and get that job done. Okay, no, good point. Very good point.
What Perrin reminds me of sometimes is Aslan.
The lion?
Oh.
Yeah, I forget which book it is in the Chronicles of Narnia, but one of the children is talking to Aslan, and they ask him, are you a tame lion? And he's like, no.
Oh, yeah.
No, I am not a tame lion. There is no such thing.
I can't say I've read him.
Perrin is like that. Like, we get this impression falsely that he's a tame wolf. But there is no such thing, really.
It goes against the definition of the word wolf. Otherwise, it would be a dog.
Yeah,
right.
Precisely. And Perrin's, no matter what Perrin's flaws are, he's not a dog.
I do love how contemptuous he is of the dog. Every time he sees dogs, too. The way he does, in his head, the way he describes them, too. He's just so contemptuous. He looks down on them so much, just like a wolf would. That's a deft little touch that Jordan just inserts there to increase that world-building aspect and bring out that lack. I was going to say humanity, but the lack of humanity in his character, Perrin. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Rob, do you have anything more on Perrin?
I did want to say, like, this chapter marks the end, despite the fact that, Drew, you just said this is where he really starts to become a new person, where he starts to take control. I did want to say that this marks the end of a significant chapter in his life, though, because starting in the next book, he begins this journey of becoming not just a worthy leader, but one who accepts that mantle of responsibility, which for him is a big deal. So I love the fact that Knife of Dreams is kind of that end cap there, or like where Perrin is finally going forward. We can say at this point going forward, it's only uphill in terms of him accepting leadership as part of his destiny. Like I love the first scene we pick up on him with him in the next book. This is not a big spoiler, of course. He's just underneath a wagon, I believe, right? He's just like fixing something, doing something with his hands, but he still has a whole stream of people walking up to him and people needing help, and it's really cool to see him do both at once. I do like where he's going forward.
Yeah, and compare like that scene of where he has gotten to with the beginning of, for instance, Winter's Heart, where nobody is telling him what they're thinking and nobody's bringing their problems to him because they see him as weak, they see him as like disillusioned and all of this stuff, and like it is just a matter of him seizing the control that has been offered to him, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and my very, very last thing about Perrin, I just wanted to point this little tad out here. We get a deft little chronological touchstone in chapter 29 here from Perrin's point of view, because Missima mentions Rand, and Perrin sees the colors, and he notices that Rand has lost his hand. And this is the point at which, if I'm not mistaken, going forward, the timelines are going to diverge and overlap a tad, and it's going to lead to some potential confusion for new readers going forward. So I just wanted to see if you had anything to say about that, Drew.
No, that's a style thing that I'm going to save for the Gathering Storm.
Okay. Just mark this point as where it begins.
All it is when the timeline started diverging in Winter's Heart, and then especially in Crossroads of Twilight and Knife of Dreams here, when clearly things are happening at different paces in the different characters' points of view. Robert Jordan was very careful to seed these things in, where like there's a Matt scene where he has the colors appear and he sees Rand talking with Min and Loyal, and that's like at the beginning of Knife of Dreams, and that scene presumably is from when we see Rand talking with Loyal in Crossroads of Twilight. You know, like it's he has these little things in there to signify, all right, this is when this happens in relation to that, and we sort of lose those in Gathering Storm and Towers of Midnight, and I think that's something I'll address more in those episodes. Cool. But
Yeah, that's the end of my Perrin discussion, though. I do have some to say about Fail, though. I actually have more to say about Fail than we do about Perrin's plot line here. So let's get Fail out of the way. I do want to say, well, actually, this first point is technically about Morghese. Magdin. You've finally seen her get to exert herself, and in doing so, save them all by attracting help. Like, that was very rewarding. And it's crazy how somebody so weak can affect change with just the appropriate amount of effort. I thought that was very vindicating. I felt very good for Morghese in that scene.
Yeah, I agree. I actually really enjoy that moment where Morghese is trying so hard, overcoming her limitations to do what she can. And that such a tiny little thing is the pivotal moment that allows them to get out safely.
Right, because you learn that I believe Morghese is the weakest channeler we ever meet in the entirety of the Wheel of Time series, yes? Androl's got a huge count on her, I'm pretty sure.
Androl's much stronger than her.
Yeah.
I believe Morghese is weaker than Sorilea.
Oh, I hadn't considered Sorilea. Well, Sorilea could channel a flame with ease, though. She, at the end of Lord of Chaos, she channeled that flame as that symbol, which was one of my favorite scenes in that whole book. I remember glowing about that, if you'll pardon the expression. But I don't think Morghese could easily channel a flame like that. It would be a lot more tremulous. It would be a lot more unstable. Or at least, maybe, she might not be weakest, but she's the least experienced. Sorry, go ahead. Least practiced.
I think she is the weakest. I'm pretty sure Sorilea is stronger than her, but they're both very, very weak. Yeah.
I would assume if there's any difference in strength between the two, it's just in terms of experience. Sorilea has at least clearly been, practicing with her weak ability.
I wish I had my companion on me right now. I have it
right behind me.
To look up like the one power strength chart to see if Morghese and Sorilea are even on it. Like,
would they even register? I think this is a joke that I made in. I want to say it was Winter's Heart, and talking about Sa Angreal and talking about like being able to compare them or having basic units of power for how much they multiply your power. And I thought, what would be the most accurate, most basic unit of measurement? Would it be like Daigyon's? Would it be like Morghese?
Morghese is the lowest tier. She is a 72 parenthetical 60. 72. She is the absolute lowest rank in the one power strength chart. I'm going to look up Sorilea now.
Yeah, if you were one unit...
Sorilea is much, much stronger.
60?
So in the companion, her level is 57 parenthetical 35, but the math is off on that. So it would be either 47 35 or 57 45.
I still don't understand the parenthetical. I always ask you about this, and you always explain it to me, and then I forget it by the next time it comes up.
Yeah, basically, there was like an original strength chart for the highest level of Aes Sedai strength before the Wonder Girls came along. And so in that, the parenthetical, that's...
Okay.
Like,
the Wonder Girls
that would be
are...
like... So the parenthetical is like the additional 12 above. And the Wonder Girls, like Nynaeve is like I think she's a 3, and that's plus 9 or plus 10 above. Like, so in the original chart that Robert Jordan made, Elida, Swan, Warraine were 1. They were rank 1.
What? Really?
Yeah, because this was
what about
they were the strongest Aes Sedai before the girls came along, like at that time in Eye of the World. And then Cadsuane, came into the story, and she's above that, and so on and so forth. But yeah, so Sorilea is very weak. I agree with this article. This guy's arguing that she's probably a 57 out of 72. So but that still makes her like over a dozen ranks higher than Morghese. So
yeah. So I'd say as far as Morghese's strength goes, relatively in the one power, if she could channel any less, she wouldn't be channeling.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Interesting. But we're still talking about Fail here. We can continue with Fail. Unless, sorry, was somebody about to jump in there?
Just a little.
Go ahead, man.
Casual aside that in a series where there's so much of epic proportion, and our protagonists and antagonists wield godlike powers. It's nice to see that sort of Tolkien kind of character. And to quote from The Return of the King, when the wise fail and falter, it will be the weak and the small who save us.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like Morghese, in my opinion.
That's
and
quaint.
a few other characters as well.
Yeah, that ties back to the point that I made at the beginning right here about Morghese. It's insane how someone, and it's so gratifying to see somebody so weak affecting change like this just because they put enough effort forth. It's awesome.
It's most gratifying.
Yeah.
Okay.
About Fail herself, though, I do want to say it's great that she's free now. It has been tough to read her captivity. I have sympathized for her in that regard. I don't know how I feel about her fatalistic attitude toward Roland's rescue, though. The way she thinks, I may have to do whatever it takes. It's just, he still doesn't read to me like he requires her to be with him, or at least to help her, you know. And he definitely doesn't give me any rapey vibes or anything like that. He might be pushing himself a little, laying it on a little thick, pushing himself a little forward too much, but I don't know if how I feel about Fael's immediate assumptions, like, well, I'm probably going to have to sleep with this guy.
Oh, that is very much the impression that I got.
And I know, and I wanted to hear you justify that. Like, what gives you that impression that he's going to be a predator in that way?
It's like just the way he acts.
That's such a nebulous thing to say,
Predator is he's manipulative. Like, he knows he's in a position of power, and maybe you can argue like this does make him a predator, but like he knows he's in a position of power. He knows he has leverage, like, and he totally wants to get in Fael's pants, and so he's like, I don't know.
What was I just about to say? Damn it! Like, I agree that he's being inappropriate. I absolutely agree with the fact that he's being inappropriate. But I don't agree with Fael's assumption that, well, I'm gonna have to get this guy laid. I'm gonna have to give myself up to him. It's like he hasn't really. I don't think he has given her enough reason to make that immediate assumption. He seems to genuinely care for her. And I don't know.
Well, okay.
See, I don't know how he could genuinely care for her. He barely knows her.
Yeah.
Well, he hesitated when he heard Perrin's name, despite the fact that he was about to die. He had to defend himself.
Yeah, that's like a surface level detail. He knows he's married to a guy named Perrin.
And that led to his death. That was instinctual. Like, that was, I don't know, I'm not going to defend him too much. I think Fael's being a little too critical. Just a tiny bit. That's not to say that he's a good person or that he's being appropriate and that he's not doing anything wrong. I just don't think he's earned that immediate judgment.
I don't see him as rapey, although very inappropriate. Like
he's no
I
Tyler.
never got the impression
talk about abusing power.
That he would resort to force or to
No,
violence to get his
definitely
way,
not.
which is the way I define rape. Whether he would,
I do not define rape that way.
Sorry, define that again.
You can
I kind
rape
of zoned out
somebody
there when I was
without using
drinking.
force. Rape is just having sex with somebody without their consent. But
he's trying to get her consent with
question.
underhanded fashion.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if she did give her consent, what he did would not be rape, even if he was underhanded in doing it.
That's something, because I mean, yeah, we're getting like really into the weeds here, but like that would be something where, you know, does consent really, like, is it really consent if it's consent under duress, which is what it would have been for Fael here.
Yeah.
Where she saw it as her only option. Where she's like, if I'm going to escape, I have to sleep with this guy. Like,
I think it's a crime of another sort.
Yeah,
I think
there
are distinctions. There are distinctions to be made, but that's like a very long and separate conversation.
Right.
I think it's still warranted a brief discussion, though. Just I wanted to get that thought out there. And I originally did not approve of Fael's decision to hide the truth about Roland from Perrin. But even at that point in my young life, I could still understand the pragmatic reasoning.
Well, so that's one of the things that, to me, is most damning about Roland, is that Fael felt the need to hide it.
What? That's why I feel vindicated. That's exactly the opposite for me. Sorry, continue. I'll rebut afterwards.
If he weren't being like predatory about it and weren't putting Fail in a situation where she felt like she had to, or she may have had to sleep with him, she wouldn't have felt like the guilt over telling Perrin, like, oh yeah, like this guy was just nice to me.
Yeah.
Right? It's not this guy was just nice to me. It was I was thinking about sleeping with him because that was the only way out I saw.
But I don't know. Sorry. Repeat that last sentence there. Sorry, I just kind of zoned out.
If he hadn't been as like manipulative and overtly interested in sex, then Fail wouldn't have had any issue telling Perrin, like, oh yeah, he was just an Aielman who was friendly to me.
See, I see it like in almost the opposite way, though. If the fact that Fail felt the need to hide from Perrin, the fact that Roland, in her eyes, wasn't, or was kind of, like, deserved protecting in his memory, like, the fact that Fail knew that would destroy Perrin to learn that he actually killed her rescuer, I think that goes to speak a lot for Roland. Because, well, he rescued her from the rubble.
Yeah, but that's like...
They would have died in there. Well, of course, Perrin might have found them, but they didn't know that. Like,
yeah.
He rescued them.
Tenuous.
Right? Like, he rescued him. And the fact that she knows it would ruin him to find out the kind of man that he killed goes to speak volumes for who Roland actually was. If Roland was a predator, Fail thought to herself, oh, he really is just like he's a bad dude, and he wants some really greasy stuff, and I'm not down with that. She would have told Perrin straight up, and thinking that Perrin's like, well, Perrin wouldn't have had a huge issue with killing somebody who would take advantage of a guy shine like that. The fact that she hid it from him...
I think the issue was more that Fail doesn't want to admit to Perrin that she was considering it.
Right. It could that's also very immature, but it is also very Fail.
Oh yeah, I'm not.
That's very Fail. No, it's very Fail. That's a good point. I think the fact that she decided to hide that from him goes to speak for Roland and not against him.
Okay.
Because if Roland was a bad dude, I mean, I think she would have had less trouble telling Perrin that he killed a bad dude.
Well, so like, and that's the tough thing with Roland is that he's not just outright a bad dude, right?
Yeah, maybe I'm trying to paint things black or white. He comes
across as this like sort of white knight kind of guy, like
no, not white knight, no.
It's sort of greasy
at risk of waving a red flag to certain online communities. He strikes me as a little bit of like an incel.
I wasn't expecting to hear that word today either.
Well, so that's exactly the kind of person who would desert their clan and join the Shido.
Honorless
but
dogs.
Like that's why he rubs me the wrong way. He's that kind of guy who'd be like, she didn't sleep with me. I did all of this great stuff for her.
I think you're you're making a judgment way too quickly, though. Like, that kind of person definitely exists. Do not misquote me on that.
That is 100%
there are many people
the kind
out
of person
there
that I see Roland as.
I do not see Roland like
that kind of Roland bullshit.
Yeah,
I
don't think Roland would have done everything he did for Fail if he didn't think he was going to get in her pants.
I think he would have. No, I think he would have and just had a very, very bad life, and she turned him down afterwards. And it would have taken a long time, and it would have led to some very uncomfortable moments.
Here's a question that will put all of that to rest.
Hit me with it.
Does he help all of the guys shine that are around with the Shido, or
no? He makes a very, very strong point in that he's not going to help anybody else until she has first cleared that rubble.
Okay, thank you. Yep. And I don't mean just Fail's entourage. I mean, does he act the way towards Fail that he acts the way toward all of the other guys shine?
But one could
and the answer
that's
is totally no.
He's in love with Fail.
He's not in love with Fail.
I said one could argue that. I didn't say he is. I said one could argue that. He thinks he is.
One could try and assault a manor house that contained Randolph Thor.
He had a clear ulterior motive in helping her. He was trying to be
I just don't think that
knight.
ulterior motive was as sinister as you guys might think it was.
I don't think the desire to get laid is necessarily sinister. Mm-hmm. I think it is sinister in all of the specific details that are going on in the situation with Roland and Fail.
Yeah.
him being in that position of power, Fail being a guy shine, and therefore by the Aiel ways, not a sexual being.
Yeah.
All of his manipulations, his offers of assistance, just so he can get what he wants, etc., etc.
Yeah. And a few minutes ago, I did say I originally, as a young teenager, I did not approve of Fael's decision to hide that truth from Perrin about, the entirety about Roland. But I said I could still understand that reasoning. Now I've slightly changed. I think Fael underestimates his growth. It may have shaken him for a few moments to learn that he just killed a man who was himself claiming to be in love with Fael, and that he had also just saved her life, apparently, moments previously. But in time, I'm pretty sure Perrin would have come to peace with that fact. To be frank, the Shido had been rampaging across the entire world. They've been taking captives for who knows how long. It might not have even taken very long for Perrin to get over it. A few days, perhaps. But then again, we would not have another cause for tension in their relationship between him and Fael going forward. So who knows how that would have turned out.
I think she made the right decision because that means that it's coming to an end. Like, it could have gotten drawn out longer than it had.
That's also a fair
because she tries to hide it, it kind of goes away. I feel like the fact
that she hides it keeps it going, because then there's another secret to be told in the future that eventually has to come out.
Yeah, but it doesn't become this long drawn out
honesty.
thing,
just honesty. Be so honest in your relationships, everybody. Come on. Communication is key, but then again, these are 17 and 19, 20-year-olds, so they're not...
You could just say, just communicate to everybody in the Wheel of Time, and the series would be 9 books shorter.
Especially the Shadow. God damn, they really suck at that. The Shadow needs to get, what's
won.
up.
Yeah. But so, do you have anything else on Fael?
No, nothing else on Fael. I still have a little bit about Matt, a little bit about Elaine, a little more about Egwene. Let's do Elaine?
Yeah, let's do Elaine.
Okay.
Elaine right on the heels of
Fael.
Yeah.
Not even a little
dark part of the episode.
Okay. I want to say, I talked about in Knife of Dreams Part 1 that I thought, this was part of the most non-objectionable, her first half of Knife of Dreams is, some of the most non-objectionable Elaine we get in the series, where I didn't have a problem with it. The second half of this book is 100% the opposite.
I figured.
Her freaking decision to go to Full Moon Street.
Yeah.
It just...
Who did she have with her? She had Van Dien. She had Coriana?
Cariana?
How the hell do you pronounce her name? Carian. Who was the fourth? There was 4, wasn't there? Saritha?
Saritha, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
One of them's a dark friend.
Who's gonna be? Bah, bah. I love the fact that Van Dien got to kill the betrayer with a knife.
Yeah. She
the fact that it wasn't even with the one power. Her sister was killed with the one power, and her killer was killed by something as mundane as a blade. Fuck you. Sorry, I needed to get that out.
No. So So Elaine was blindingly stupid.
Very.
There's no sugarcoating that one.
In her defense, though.
What? You defense.
Her information was incomplete. She didn't know that there was a second group of Black Aja who just showed up.
Right.
If they hadn't shown up when they did, that mission would have succeeded without a hitch. They rolled up in there and were in control, and then they got ambushed.
That's part of why I think it's
here's the thing. You're dealing with the Black Aja. You should be wary of an ambush.
Yeah, are you going to go in there with a manual and stick to it by the T? You have to be ready for anything.
And the decision to leave warders behind. The people who are specifically there to help protect you from being blindsided.
Exactly the thing that happened.
There's no sugarcoating this. This woman is a stubborn, reckless idiot. If you think that Elaine went into this...
hundreds of her guards killed?
Yeah.
Because of this?
That she went into this prepared well enough... Considering the information that she had.
Consider
also in the fact that in the space of 3 minutes Brigitte managed to mount a rescue against the combined might of the Black Aja and Aemlyn, who were ready for Aemlyn and Caemlyn, who were ready for her at that point. That should tell you something about how effectively Elaine, as a channeler of the One Power, with backup, planned her specific assault for her own part. I hold a very strong grudge against her, in particular, for taking advantage of Van Dien's fragile emotional state, because she knew that Van Dien would just be bloodthirsty enough to immediately agree on that plan. I think that was pretty low. I think Elaine wasn't considering what exactly she was asking at that point. And I do hold a small grudge against Elaine for getting Van Dien killed.
Yeah, that's fair.
Aes Sedai manipulation.
That would be cool to see Van Dien fight in the last battle.
It was. She was green.
Yep. Yep.
And you know she had some weaves up her sleeve.
Now,
she's the one who presumably taught Moiraine Balefire.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Presumably.
She would have learned that in book 2 in the Watchers.
Yeah.
Right? On the farm with Van Dien and Adelinas. Interesting.
Yep.
Now, last episode,
a proper Battle Aja sister
experiencing
that'd be a cool episode.
Perhaps a little bit of confusion, but it is. I distinctly remember thinking that Elaine knew that at least one of the sisters who she was taking with her was a black sister, because of the murder of Adelinas.
Right, and there's a moment at which point she's waiting for somebody to object to the plan, and she's kind of frustrated that one of two or neither of two characters objects, because that would have given her a hint as to who the Dark Front actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that scene.
So maybe she didn't know, but there was.
She knew somebody was. She knew somebody was. Yeah.
Yeah, but there were so many people in their group traveling north that while she was like, it was probably one of the Aes Sedai, she couldn't be certain of it.
Right.
And so, like, that casts doubt on,
That makes the plan even more impetuous.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I mean, Brigitte cannot channel, and look at the rescue she mounted against Black Aja, who were ready for her. You mean to tell me Elaine couldn't have done better? With the element of surprise? Like, come on.
Yeah, she definitely could have, but I'm not going to... Like, Brigitte was acting out of desperation here. Like, she rescued Elaine, but
then again,
tremendous cost.
Elaine was trying to be subtle. Brigitte was not concerned about subtlety at that point. That's a good point.
Yeah, like, that was not a particularly deft extraction of Elaine here. It was...
But I'm through talking about her.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only point that I had written about Elaine, honestly.
I want to talk about Egwene.
Okay.
And I'm just going to lead this off by saying this is the best, hands down, no contest, the best Egwene we get in the entire series. I love Honey in the Tea.
Oh my god, I was not ready to hear you say that.
Phenomenal.
Okay.
Phenomenal stuff.
I am so glad that you said that, because I started off my points by saying I think this is where Drew and I are going to diverge for a bit in our opinions about Egwene.
No.
And we actually had a commenter in our Inking Out Loud podcast Facebook group today thinking, I hope Drew gives her some slack for this part. But Drew, you're saying you definitely do approve of Egwene for this sequence.
This chapter is phenomenal.
Good.
This is when every virtue Egwene has is on full display. She is a complete badass. I love the way she takes her unique approach to things and tempers it enough that she doesn't screw herself over, but still uses it in ways that wrecks everybody who tries to shove her down here.
Yeah.
This is just pure sticking it to the man. It's so good.
Yeah.
The one scene when she's
sticking it to the man. I think
she does the 14 different weaves at one time, and that obnoxious accepted is just like
you can't do that.
Yeah. She's freaking out and she's like, what do I even do? Go get Aes Sedai.
With Forkroot, presumably, right?
Yeah, no, it is with Forkroot, and she talks
That's
about
amazing.
how because there are the 7 colors for the balls and the 7 colors for the rings. And so there's 7 and 7, 14 weaves, but they're all really pale. And she's like, just because I can't channel a lot of the power doesn't mean I can't split my weaves. let me show you how much
She's flexing.
I am on a completely...
She's just flexing. I love it.
Oh, yeah. She's like, you're trying to lord it over me as some lowly freaking accepted. I'm one of the most accomplished female channelers in the world. Get on my level, bitch.
Yeah. Okay, good. I was gonna say, like, this is Egwene saying, "Sit the fuck down." Like,
yeah.
You know who I am.
Yeah. And you cannot even observe my level.
She has all of this badassitude throughout this chapter, and then for the first time, the vindication. She takes the sip of the tea, and there's honey in it, and she just has this little smile on her face. Yep. Knowing the seeds are planted and they are sprouting. Like, it...
Yeah.
Just
that's a
amazing chapter.
That moment with
chapter.
The sip and the recognizing of the flavor of honey, that really reminds me of that scene that I said I think was my favorite. There's definitely a top 3 for Fires of Heaven, when Rand meets Bashir for the first time and he learns that he's just acquired 9,000 Saldean horse. And in that, his response is just swirl the wine. You know, that little moment is just, it's not little. It appears little, but appearance is just so deceiving. I love it. And up until this point in the podcast, through all of our previous episodes, we've been in a relative agreement on how much we dislike Egwene. There have been a few points where I decided to speak up for her. I don't remember if you ever have, Drew.
I have, a couple of times, actually.
You've spoken up for her a couple times.
And every time I've surprised you.
No, I think it was when she was training
Reborn.
with Avienda. Oh, Dragon Reborn.
I
was going to say training with
Fires of
Avienda.
Heaven,
in the
when they run the
running
laps.
around the Wise Ones camp, yeah.
Yep.
Like, Egwene's, like, undermining of Elida in the tower is just so well executed as a character and as like, just... As a plot point on Jordan's part, like, in a position of complete powerlessness, this character manages to assert herself as a leader and consistently spoke Elida's wheel. And she only gets better and better at this as we head into the next book. This is something actually I will retort with. I think Egwene is even better in The Gathering Storm. I don't think this is her top yet. I think her top is in The Gathering Storm.
We'll get there.
Okay, but it's also it's still neat to see. It's still very, very neat to see. But The Gathering Storm Egwene is my favorite Egwene.
I'll say, like, with Egwene in this book, is that when you say she's powerless, I don't think that's true.
Okay, yeah.
Because she still has the world of dreams. She's still in communication. If she wanted,
chooses... Oh, she hasn't...
If she wanted, she could just say, hey, I'm in this room. One of y'all, open a gateway, come get me.
Is this not the novel where Egwene tells Elida that she has... access to the world of dreams?
Well, so she tells the Aes Sedai, she tells, like, Katerin Al-Rudin at the beginning, she's like, I'm a dreamer. She tries to warn them of the Shanshan attack. Yeah. And they don't believe her, you know.
They just, scoff it off, yeah. Of course they do.
She's like, you can ask Lyanna, and they're like, well, we will, and if she doesn't back up your story, you're going to get punished. And no, so this is the book that she tells Swan, don't get me. Don't come get me.
Yeah, don't come get me.
Yeah. So, but she has that option. If she wanted, she could just say, hey, I am in this room in the novice quarters. One of y'all open a gateway and come get me. And, like, the tower has no idea to protect against that. Like, she'd be out in a moment.
Yeah. That context is why what she does is so badass.
Exactly, yeah. And so this is what I was saying, like, where she takes all of her virtues, all the best things about Egwene, she tempers them enough that they don't become vices, which they do become at certain points in the series, where she goes, like, so overboard with her strengths that she, like, becomes very egotistical and hypocritical and things. But here, she is so smart and so effective. Like, it's tons of fun to read.
Yeah.
Because she's exposing all of the flaws and the arrogance of the establishment of the White Tower. Like, we've been seeing the Aes Sedai grow from these mysterious, super cool, magic-using, powerful women at the beginning of the series, and then as we get to know them more and more, we realize just how petty and human they are.
Yeah.
And we've been waiting for Aes Sedai as a whole, as an institution, to get their comeuppance. And this is when it happens. This is when... Yeah.
So finish your thought.
Well, this is when Egwene exposes all the flaws of the tower. Unfortunately, she then forgets what she just exposed in a couple of books and reiterates all those flaws, but that's beside the point.
The problem with every revolution is not perpetrating the sins of the previous regime to a much greater degray.
That's never happened before.
Not once. Not once.
But so I have basically nothing bad to say about Egwene in this book.
A big part of why Egwene's attitude here is so effective is just because of the element of surprise. Like, she is expected, like this reversal of expectation that Egwene is playing on is brilliant. She's expected to become this soft-spoken, meek, trying to avoid any kind of punishment, know that she did something wrong, and please have mercy on me kind of attitude. But she ends up being nothing but competent. Like, she confronts Bayonin about her betrayal, leaving the other woman shaken. She's chatting with Sylviana, and I'll admit I found that a little bit, like, not unrealistic, maybe just surreal.
I thought that was so in character.
I don't know. The fact that Sylviana's an Aes Sedai as well, the fact that she just mindlessly starts chatting without realizing what Egwene is doing, I found that to be a little, I don't know.
Because it's so ingrained in her. So two things. One, it's Aes Sedai are used to people groveling, and when they don't grovel, there's a reason for it. And two, Egwene is really powerful. And Aes Sedai have this ingrained one-power hierarchy. And so, to Sylviana, it's easy for her to slip into, these deep-seated expectations when Egwene doesn't act like a novice. She acts like an Aes Sedai. And so, Sylviana's natural reaction is to treat her like an Aes Sedai who is stronger than her. And so, she's predisposed to converse with Egwene, and then of course she realized, she's like, oh no, what am I doing, and she's like, well, I gotta slipper you even more now,
I feel like the noticing should have happened right away, though. I'm not saying it shouldn't have happened, but how long it went on without Sylviana noticing, it kind of makes me go, come on, Sylviana.
Well, here's the third angle is that Sylviana recognizes the issues at present in the White Tower, and when Egwene is addressing them, Sylviana hasn't had this outlet. She's frustrated.
True, yeah.
And so when she has an outlet to address her frustrations...
Egwene is talking about something that genuinely is of interest to Sylviana. And Egwene's approach with all the different Aes Sedai, how she works her way into them, let's say. When she's talking to a brown...
Right.
She'll have a certain tactic that's different from a green,
and we will address this again in the Gathering Storm.
But as a contrast to that, though, take the novices. The novices are not used to operating under this kind of hierarchy of the one power and having this expectation of obedience. The novices are brand new. They're fresh. They're weak, and they're so reverent of Egwene. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool, but it's also a little
model.
How? She is the most punished person in the tower. They just got there. They don't have any context for just what Egwene has been through.
And how is she handling the punishment? She's not buckling under it. She is in this book, she is a paragon of virtue for the novices. They're like, this is somebody I can only aspire to be like.
If they had a competent Amerlin, maybe my point would be a little more valid. But the fact that Elida is so clearly unhinged at this point, maybe I shouldn't be so surprised that they would gravitate towards Egwene in the way that they do.
Well, they're novices. That their natural inclination is to look toward authority.
Right, and Egwene in a white dress is kind of hard to see.
Well, but she's one of their number, though. And so when they see one of their number not only approaching the bearing and authority of full Aes Sedai, but exceeding them, they're like, wow, this woman is incredible.
I can see them being inspired, but reverent is kind of what bothers me. They're just like...
But it doesn't happen right away either.
I think
it's not that easy.
Reverence is a natural outgrowth of, being of inspiration.
Sure. Okay. I can see that.
Yeah.
Might be tempted to agree. That does wrap up my Egwene points, though.
Okay. Pat, did you have anything more?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that this is Egwene's Aiel coming out in this whole section. Her whole attitude is an Aiel attitude. And that's what rocks the Aes Sedai on their foundation.
I will say this. It is her interpretation of an Aiel attitude.
Sure. That was...
Okay.
Fair point.
The Aiel get their revenge.
I think that leaves us with Matt.
Yep.
Right?
Woo.
Because, oh my gosh. Everything
Ladies and
Matt...
gentlemen. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just perfect. Everything, every page of Matt in the second half of this book, really in the whole book, but especially the second half, is just unadulterated brilliance. Like, the moments with Talmanes, the bit with, like, the Black Lance, you know, and when he first kisses Tuon.
Yeah, and he has to redo it.
And then, you know,
he's going to do it a third time, too.
His entire campaign that he carries out, this just intricate, exquisitely executed manipulation of the entire Shan-Chan military in the region, and then the domestic scene when Furyk Kharid shows up and
mistakes Tom for Matt.
Oh my gosh! We'll get to Furyk
in case
Kharid
you all couldn't tell. Drew's a big fan.
And then Matt, like, we see, this is where we get Tuon's impression of Matt, where she's, like, realizing just how layered and flexible and competent and just unexpected he is. And it comes true. We see so many different aspects of Matt in these chapters. And the resulting, you know, the climactic battle where he brings to bear gunpowder weapons for the first time and just destroys Elbar's army.
Those are gunpowder weapons? I thought they were crossbows.
They have dragons.
No, they don't have dragons.
Well,
they have slingshots with grenades in them, essentially.
Right.
What?
With, like,
I only got the crossbows that reload 7 or 8 or fire 7 or 8 times per minute. I didn't get the explosive gunpowder.
He very much uses the crossbows
and mini missile launchers.
Okay, so tubes. So here is the quote. He's got Mandevwin launching launching the crossbows and all that. And then, as they get closer, where is the line?
I love the Shan-Chan reaction to those crossbows as well. It's like... Oh,
so, sling men, Mandevwin shouted, loose at will. Front rank west, loose. And then sling men along the western rank shifted their sling staffs so they could touch the fuses coming from the stubby cylinders to the slow matches held in their teeth. The dark cylinders flew more than 100 paces to land among the onrushing horsemen. The slingmen were already fitting more of the cylinders to their slings before the first fell. And then, Aludra had marked each fuse with pieces of thread to indicate different burning times, and each cylinder erupted with a roar and a burst of flame, some on the ground, some as high as a mounted man's head. The explosion was not the real weapon, though a man struck in the face was suddenly headless. No, Aludra had wrapped a layer of hard pebbles around the powder inside each cylinder, and those pierced flesh deeply when they hit. He's using frag grenades.
Yeah. Okay. I love the terminology that they come up with too to describe these things that we already know. Slow matches.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so awesome.
Yeah. So
okay, that's a little detail I missed out on.
Oh my gosh, just everything Matt. And then what puts it over the top is Furyk Kharid. The Cup of Calf chapter, when Kharid goes and meets with, the Banner General and has this conversation, and he's like dealing with the like hostility toward the Death Watch guards and kind of throwing his weight around as outranking the guy like halfway and all that, and he finally gets the guy to break down what's going on with Matt's campaign, and he like unrolls the map and he's showing him like all the engagements and movements and things, and he's like, this is incredible. Like, how is this possible? There are so many of them. And they think there's, like, tens of thousands of, like, because it doesn't make sense to them how this could be possible with only the small couple thousand men that Matt has. It is just so beautifully done. And then, as Pat said, when Kharid shows up in Matt's camp and starts immediately addressing himself to Tom Maryland.
Tom Maryland.
And Tom's sitting there, like, knuckling his mustache and is, like, trying not to laugh.
Oh, man, you're so close, but you're so far.
Yeah. and then just Fear of Kharid. Getting that scene from Kharid's point of view instead of from Matt's point of view or Tuon's point of view was a stroke of genius. It's so good. It's so good. And then the descriptions where, like, he said he feels like Hartha just kicked him in the gut.
Yeah.
And then he's like, no, not Hartha. It feels like Eldazar, my horse, just kicked me in the gut. Like, oh, and the fact that Tuon uses the exact wording, bloody Matrim Cawthon is my husband.
Mm-hmm. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And
speaking of Tuon, ladies and gentlemen, Matrim Cawthon is a married man.
Yep.
Let the weeping of every fine maiden ring forlorn across the land from World's End to Shara. He is taken.
So good.
Well, you know what? The thing that makes Matt and his love story so great in this book is Tuon.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of woman Tuon is about the only woman who could actually handle Matt.
No. I agree with that. Tuon was definitely at her best in terms of their relationship in this book. I do think
I don't know if I would say she's the only kind of woman who could handle Matt.
I like Aludra. I'm still shipping Matt
and Aludra. She's the only
Aludra.
kind of woman Matt could be engaged with.
Thank you. That's a better way to say it.
Like, Matt would essentially lose interest.
Yes, he would get bored of Aludra, of Tylan.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of Betsy at the dance.
Matt needs somebody who can engage him on his level. And Tuon, like Matt, is a person of surprising depth.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Tuon's best line of all time occurs in this book. Do I remind you of your sister toy?
Oh,
yeah. Matt just like, okay, listen up, little one.
He's like, all right,
buckle up.
He like takes his hat off. He's like, all right, it's going down.
He was going for a third one, but she stopped him too.
Yeah.
And I love how we got
that line is amazing.
That.
Although I will say another one of my favorite Tuon lines, also in this book, from the first half. Like, she puts her mug on the table. Guard this until my return. He's like, what? Where are you going? She's like, to do the necessary, toy.
Yeah. Tuon for me, in this book was at her best. There's no Tuon I like more than this Tuon. Going forward, I'm so frustrated.
When she gets away from the Shanshan and all of the bullshit,
yes,
in their culture, she's pretty good.
Yeah,
she's awesome away from the Shanshan, but as soon as she gets back in command, she becomes a bitch. She's cold. She's heartless. She's a statue. She's
Yeah.
I wish Matt could be with Knife of Dreams Tuon instead of having to be with Fortuona. I really hate the fact that Matt ended up with Fortuona and not with Tuon.
I am with you, Pat.
Yeah.
Hey?
Like, they're both at their best in this book, and then they both
100%.
Start becoming at their worst.
That's how I'll state my opinion. I really wish Matt had ended up with Tuon, not with Fortuona.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's a
like, glimpses of her come out in A Memory of Light, but that's a ways down the road.
So,
is that the end of our characters?
I think that's the end of characters. I do have a couple of like high-level plot points to discuss, and maybe this can lead into our favorite scenes. Favorite scenes was tough for this book.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about, like maybe kind of like a lore blend, because I don't have a ton of like really specific lore things, but I want to start off with this chapter directly in the middle of the book to make an anchor weep.
Yeah.
Where we have this meeting of the Wave Mistresses, and Loghain shows up. and we find out about the mass suicide of the Amayar. And the lore side of this here is that there was an explosion of theorizing after Crossroads of Twilight, because Robert Jordan said that there was going to be a moment in Knife of Dreams, a shock moment, a moment that like would just crush everybody, and
what the
and that it was something that he didn't think anybody had picked up on from events that happened earlier in the series. And so people are like, what could this be, you know? And it was this scene. It was the mass suicide of the Amayar. And so it had been hyped up so much with all the theorizing and everything that when this scene landed, like, nobody really cared about the Amayar.
Yeah.
And so it fell flat. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't really like. I thought it was a cool way to end Winter's Heart, but I like when we learned exactly what happened, I was like, oh, okay. How does that pertain to what our characters are struggling through right now? Like, it really doesn't mean anything.
I thought it was sad in an abstract way, but more bizarre than anything else.
Right? Yeah.
Bizarre. Yeah.
And so it was this huge cognitive dissonance in the fandom where it was like we were supposed to think this was the craziest, saddest thing ever, and then nobody really cared.
So here's a question: what was the craziest, saddest thing ever? If this wasn't, if you had
the saddest moment in the series,
the saddest moment in the series, Moraine's death, surely, right?
This is a conversation for another time.
I think this is a conversation we're going to have in the Gathering Storm.
What? Really? Talking about Captain Sparrow again?
No.
Immediately.
The last that could be done.
Oh yeah, but it turns out all right in a very weird way. I don't know. Maybe it's not maybe the biggest tragedy is what I meant to say. Sorry, continue. Let's chug on though.
While for me, I didn't find that aspect of this chapter hit home at all. One part of it that did hit home, and is one of my favorite lines in the entire series, is at the very end of the chapter, when Logain is telling them, like, look, you guys gotta, you gotta hold to your bargain. He says the fastest ships must be sent to every island, blah, 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 And he says, this is as sad a story as I have ever heard, but your ships are committed to Bandar Eben.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough rakers, then you must use your other fast ships too. All of them, if necessary. And then Zyda says, are you mad as well as heartless? We must mourn. We must save who we can and mourn for the countless thousands we cannot save. And Logain, like Tayyim, comes down with just the hammer of a line, and he says, mourn if you must, but mourn on the march for Tarmon Gaidon.
Yeah. And that's immediately following the chapter, I think, where Rand tells much the same to Darlin, saying, when Darlin asks, March, where are we marching? To Shayal Ghul.
It is. So...
that momentum. Yeah. Oh, it's just...
So he says, but what am I supposed to do in Arad Doman? The little I've heard of that land, it's a madhouse. And Rand says, Tarmon Gaidon is coming soon. You are going to Arad Doman to get ready for Tarmon Gaidon.
That's what he says?
Yep.
Oh. At what point is it where someone asks him where do we march? And he says to Shayal Ghul. Maybe it's in the Gathering Storm.
Oh, yeah, that particular line is...
To Shayal Ghul is like the last 3 words of a chapter.
I think that's in Towers of Midnight, actually.
Oh, yeah,
it's
look
when
at me.
Rand returns
jumping
to
the gun on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because he's there and meets Tam. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so like I just wanted to touch on that chapter because I think that chapter gets lost in the mix because it's sandwiched between like the 2 chapters before it are or 2 of the 3 chapters before it are Vows and the Golden Crane.
We didn't talk about Land. We had a fan request to talk about Land.
Oh, we'll get to that in favorite scenes, I'm sure.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay. Well, if you're sure, that means it's okay. Got you.
Yeah. But yeah, and then immediately after that, to make an anchor weep, we go and do like Perrin fighting at Malden, and so like it's and Honey and the Tea and all that. It's easy to have that chapter kind of get lost in the mix, so I wanted to highlight that.
Okay.
But yeah,
sure
so Rob, I wanted to
attention.
ask before we go on.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? Do you have any like lore things?
I do not. I just have a couple of miscellaneous notes to make here. One of which I've already said, I'm pretty sure. Oh, you know what? Sorry. Scratch what I said. I have one question, and it might be a stupid question because I didn't research anything on this. Drew.
No stupid questions, just stupid people.
Wait. I might flip that expectation someday, but I don't think this one's altogether stupid. Why does Rand see these black flecks after the fireball that like just blasted off his left hand? He sees
he's super bright. It messed up his vision.
But he's specifically black flecks though. Like, do we not think that perhaps Semirag? I prefer Semirag. Whatever. Used the true power in that weaving? Was Saidar detected by anybody noticeably, or did she?
Yeah, Saidar was used and detected. No, it was the black flecks are just like his vision was messed up by the brightness of the fireball.
Oh yeah, I remember because that's what I asked. Was that part of the damage to his eyes? I didn't ask that. Sorry, that's what I wrote.
Yeah,
was that part of the damage to his eyes?
He talks like as it goes on, like he talks about how over time that goes away.
It's just it's the terminology of black flecks, specifically those two words together that we've seen before. I'm just like, it makes me suspicious, but then I realize it's probably a stupid question because even if Semiraj was using the true power, why would Rand be seeing black flecks? It doesn't really make sense. Yeah. But it could be like resonance from Moradin's. I don't know, but okay. I just wanted to ask to get a confirmation on that. It was just eye damage. He was seeing spots.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another of Min's viewings has finally come to pass. We have a King of Tyr.
Yep.
Congratulations, High Lord Darlin. In my last miscellaneous thought here, I'm glad to see that Vandene at least got to have brief revenge. And I mentioned this earlier, I love the fact that it was done with something as simple as a knife. Actually, what I wrote down was, I love the fact that it was done with a knife, which kind of concerned me about my own thought process in hindsight. But then Chesmal Emry decides to contend for the biggest Bitch of the Year award. And no bitch was not the first word that I placed there.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a wrap on Adelius and Vandene. Rest in the light, ladies.
So I have two sort of minor lore things to bring up. One of them is going back to that Tuon Helen Maderen scene that I find an amusing fact. Robert Jordan received a lot of criticism from fans. You could say it's founded, you could say it's unfounded. People are like, it's not realistic. People don't use the bathroom in the Wheel of Time. Basically, people were being like, you need to write more like Game of Thrones. You need to write A Song of Ice and Fire, where you see people like
gritty,
shitting and pissing everywhere. Like, sure. And so, Robert Jordan, of course, that's not his style. That's not what he cares about telling in his story. But as a sort of sarcastic nod to them, he wrote in that scene in The Hell in Maderen where Tuon's like, I'm going to the bathroom, Matt. Is
that why that's in there? Are you kidding
That
me?
is why it's in there.
No, that's the only response people who would make a criticism like that deserve, because honestly, who cares?
Right.
It's so dumb. You're not reading
books.
You're reading
so
fantasy
I can get a blow by
for a
blow
reason.
description of some guy taking a dump.
I'm reading it on the toilet anyway.
Read it. Yeah.
So why is it?
That's a good point. You read it to escape real life. You don't read it just for more of the mundane.
Exactly.
Is there anything more mundane than hiking down your trousers and taking a dump on a Sunday morning? That's just... It's part of life. You don't need to explain that they're breathing in every single scene. You don't need to explain that they're cracking their knuckles. You just kind of take it for granted that this stuff is happening in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It's called
suspend some
imagination.
So my other kind of lore point here is more just a discussion of what it was like as somebody in the Wheel of Time online fandom when this book came out.
Okay.
And how theorizing hit sort of a fever pitch. And Demandred was the hot topic.
Yeah.
This is the first book that I had to wait for. I remember saying that before, too, so we're probably very similar. Continue.
So in the forums, Theoryland, Watmania and Dragon Mount and stuff like that. Raging arguments and discussions about who Demandred was.
Because of
At this point, we had quotes from Robert Jordan saying no, basically like no, Taim is not Demandred. I mean, we had the quotes in.
They had he was concretely saying that at that point. In 2005.
I don't remember if that was when, but certainly in Winter's Heart we had like direct evidence that Taim was not Demandred.
How so?
When
the scene from Slayer.
Yeah, we have the scene with Slayer where he's like going to kill the couple in bed in Farmading, and he talks about how he got like conflicting orders from Demandred and from Taim.
Oh, damn it! Another little
like
detail that I didn't pick up on.
Demandred. So Taim
obviously
tells
I knew
him
they weren't the same,
kill the Dragon Reborn, and then Demandred gives him orders, and he's like, kill the Dragon Reborn. Do not tell anybody, even if they order you to, that I told you this. Don't tell Taim. Don't tell Moradin. Like so there's like they're conflicting.
I'm assuming back then a fan would have said, "Of course." What is?
Yeah, and
you
that's
include
where,
yourself on the list.
That's where I believe Robert Jordan like outright said like in a quote. I'd have to go dig through Theoryland again, but it was very clear by Winter's Heart that Taim was not Demandred.
Yeah,
and so but despite that, people were still arguing that he was.
Oh, I would have been one of those people.
Book, the end of this book was another point where people were like, clearly he's a Forsaken, you know, and but a new semi-popular theory popped up after this book, and that was Charles Gaibon. Some people thought Gaibon was Demandred.
The Tower Guard, Charles Gaibon?
No, the
Camelin?
commander of Elaine's
Camelin,
guards.
I said Tower Guard. Camelin Guard, the Queen's Guard.
Yep. Yeah,
really?
So there were some people who thought that he was too competent for his youth, and that we had seen Demandred in the World of Dreams hanging around Camelin a lot, and the fact that Demandred is always jealous of Lews Therin and thus Rand, and that he would then try to
with Elaine. Oh, I can see how people would get that instinct though. That's interesting. That's
so that was a fun theory. I never like got on board that one, but I was always entertained by it. And then of course the leading theory at this point was King Roedran in Meereen.
Yeah, Roedran and Meereen being Demandred.
But
which Sanderson decided to play with. I love that.
Despite all of this, we have yet another hint in this book that the Sharans are sizing up Randland. When Rand is in Tyr at the inn before he travels into the Stone, there's another Sharan, like a merchant, in the common room.
God damn it! How did I miss that?
Yeah.
I didn't make the connection with the description. I didn't make that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Most intriguing.
So, going into our favorite scenes, I did hurriedly write 3, because if you couldn't tell from my gasp of horrified surprise earlier, I did forget previously to actually write down 3.
I figured.
My very instinctual first impression, knee-jerk 3 here are as follows. So I go from first to third to first. I'll go third to first. Rand losing his hand in that very, very brief showdown with Semirog. That was so cool because at that point when I was a teenager, I had no idea what Semirog was up to. I had no idea what she was doing. She was just so out of place in that scene. Well, not out of place, but she was so she was just so immediately in there, in your face before you were ready for it. And the fact that she managed to get the drop on the Dragon Reborn and actually do physical damage to the Dragon Reborn that no other Forsaken save Ishamael in the World of Dreams had done to Rand previously. Like, that was pretty cool. Semirog is one of the... I'll say Semiraj for those who prefer the soft G. I know I'm part of the minority. But the fact that she managed to actually damage Rand in some way and take his hand is part of the reason why she is so intimidating to me, personally, as a character, as an antagonist. I don't really fear any of the Forsaken as much as I fear Semiraj, even Ishamael, even Morgan, just because of her reputation, the Lady of Pain, and the fact that she managed to be the one to permanently scar Lews Therin was just, intimidating as hell.
It's like opening a box and finding a cobra that's already bitten you inside.
Yeah, and of course knowing what she forces Rand to do in the future, without spoiling too much. We assume, of course, you've read the entirety of the Wheel of Time series if you're at this point in the podcast. But yeah, Semiraj, top tier Forsaken, one of my favorite, just in terms of how bad she is and how competent she is. She was terrifying in Lord of Chaos with Cabriana Missandei. Or was it Crown of Swords when she was torturing the Aes Sedai?
It was Lord of Chaos.
It was Lord of Chaos? Mm-hmm. Oh my god. Like, what a nightmare it would be to even affiliate with somebody like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
I couldn't agree more.
So that's my third favorite. My second favorite would be the Manor House battle. I know that's a cop-out answer at Lord Elgaren's manor in Tyr. The fact that we had so many Shadowspawn arriving so quickly, and the fact that we finally got to see what Lews Therin's weaves look like against when he's fighting for his life against Shadowspawn, that was just so goddamn epic. So that had to be in my top 3 somewhere, and that's where it's going to go, because in my first place, my number 1 favorite scene was a scene that gave me, more than anything else, a reason to keep reading The Wheel of Time after Robert Jordan passed away.
Oh.
And that was the scene where finally we got to know, when we got to read Moiraine's letter to Tom Merrilin. And then they made the decision that we found out that she was alive. My girl, Moiraine's alive. And she can be rescued. And they'd make the decision that they're going to rescue her. That was the reason I was waiting up restless for Towers of Midnight. That was the reason I was chomping at the bit to get through every single page of that book. And why I just continue with the Wheel of Time, honestly, in large part, after it was announced that Robert Jordan had passed away. Because I was so excited to see Moiraine again, and the fact that it was going to be Matt rescuing her, and that Tom had been sitting on this letter the whole time, and that they were ready to finally make that decision. I was so hyped. Just the sheer amount of hype I got out of what that implies. That's why that scene became number 1 for me.
That's an admirable list.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And
I say that in large part because 66% of it is the same as mine.
Yeah?
No. So the Manor House was obviously...
that was the obvious one. I felt bad for saying that.
It's the cool choice. Like, it's got that cool factor in it.
Right.
My second is the Moiraine discovery.
Okay.
The chilling aspect of it and the implications of the future. A lot of emotions came up for me during that scene, so it's the most serious scene. But my number 1 is the Kharid showing up to the camp. Everything from Nat till Matt and Tuon are man and wife.
Okay.
Okay.
Because that's got everything.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going to predict that Drew has at least 2 Matt scenes.
So I'm going to have some honorable mentions here because it is just...
Yeah.
It's too hard. I can't not... So one honorable mention, Galad versus Valda.
Oh!
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. One of the best duels.
That would be 5th or 6th for me.
Duel Robert Jordan wrote. Another honorable mention is the fight in the street in Maderen when Matt sees Tuon go all badass, and then he turns around and like Tom and Seleucia have taken care of their bundle of people. And Matt's like, wow, Tom must have like really outdone himself, and completely misses the fact that it was all Seleucia. and Seleucia makes a comment, and Tom's like, I didn't see anything,
Tom knows. He knows better.
He's like, I'm an old man. I've already forgotten anything I've ever
seen.
Sage,
he's wise. Listen to Tom Merrill.
That definitely an honorable mention. Vows, honorable mention. Of course, phenomenal.
Yes.
But my 3 favorite scenes Third, Furyk Karede meeting with the other Banner General and having his discussion and going, like, breaking down Matt's campaign and slowly realizing, oh, he's trying to get through the Malvide Narrows.
Gamelaun. I'm looking at his name right here. How the hell you pronounce that? Sorry, go ahead.
Second one is, as Pat said, Furyk Karede showing up at the camp, Matt getting married, and just having this succession of shock after shock after shock for Karede. And my favorite scene in the book is Nynaeve in Golden Crane.
The Golden Crane flies for Tarmangaiden.
It is.
I love Nynaeve. I can't believe I haven't even talked about Nynaeve in this book.
What was the guy's name? Aldragoran, something like that. Aldragoran. And just having that scene not from Nynaeve's point of view. This is one of the things that Robert Jordan did so well in this book, is having these massive moments viewed by outsiders, because we are outsiders, and so we see them through the lens of somebody who has the same emotions we do, ideally, right?
Yeah.
And in this moment where Aldragoran is just overcome, they're jumping from their seats. The Golden Crane flies for Tarmangaiden, and he's laughing and they're shouting, and it's just, I cannot read this scene without tears coming to my eyes. It is beautiful. It's just vintage Nynaeve.
That's how I feel about the prologue of Towers of Midnight at Heath Tower.
Oh, Heath Tower, brilliant.
I feel that way about Heath Tower. Sanderson fucking nailed that scene.
That was Robert Jordan.
That was what? What?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I love how Pat started cracking up before I even reacted to that, because he knew that already. That was Robert Jordan? I thought he only did the one dude at the beginning in The Gathering Storm who sees the silver and black clouds. And of course,
Robert Jordan did one scene in each of the 3 prologues.
Oh.
And
fascinating.
We'll get to,
I'm still learning new stuff. That's awesome.
I'm going to try to keep this one in the back pocket. Some of our listeners will already know which scene he did in the Memory of Light prologue, but I'm going to keep that one in my back
Fairly
pocket
certain I know too.
For the Memory of Light episodes. But yeah, so he did the scene in Gathering Storm with the farmer, talking to his buddy and saying, it's time to go to war. And then he did the scene in Heath Tower in Towers of Midnight.
Heath Tower, it was Robert Jordan. I am going to appreciate that scene so much more going forward now. I thought that was the Sanderson thing, because it reads so beautifully.
Yeah. So before we go into the final draft, do you guys have any wrap-up points? Because I do.
I mean, I do as well. It's really just the one point, and I'm pretty sure it's the same point, or one of the same points you're about to make. I planned for 6 months trying to find the right words to say after knowing that I was going to wrap Knife of Dreams. And at that time, I mean, after all this time, I really can't find anything to say. Nothing feels like quite enough. But I just want to say it simply, I suppose. Wherever he is or may be, I want to say thank you, Robert Jordan, for changing my life in the way that you did. I mean, you accomplished something that in your lifetime that the vast majority of us can only hope to emulate. And that legacy is undoubtedly going to live on through myth and legend for as long as we continue to tell stories to one another. Like this one, I want to raise a drink, but I'll also assume that you have something to say about the passing of Mr. Jordan after this one, so we'll drink together after you have to say what you've got to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, you stole a lot of my words with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry there, but I had to say something. I didn't know if I...
Yeah, no worries at all. I mean, I think that is just a testament to what Robert Jordan created with this series and how he impacted people's lives. I know, had I not read The Wheel of Time, I would be living a very different life today.
Yeah, he may be the single biggest influence in my life. I can't think of anything that's influenced me as much.
I'm a writer because of The Wheel of Time. I have the career I do because of The Wheel of Time. I have many of my best friends because of The Wheel of Time. I probably wouldn't have married my wife had I not become, a fan of reading fantasy because of the Wheel of Time. Like, it is incredible just across all layers of my life how Robert Jordan's writing has shaped the course of events that I have followed in the last going on 20 years now. It's impossible to put into words. And I think it is so wonderful. It is so wonderful that the last book we got from him was this book. Was that it was Robert Jordan at the top of his game. It was him starting to put the pieces back together after he spread them so widely apart. Laying the foundation for this ending that he envisioned back in the 80s. To the point where he thought he was going to do it in one more book. His vision was so tight and so narrow of what he was going to do next that he thought he was going to do it in one more book. And it was all possible because of this. And after, this reread up through Knife of Dreams, I think I have changed my mind, and that this is my favorite book in the Wheel of Time, not The Shadow Rising.
You had previously said The Shadow Rising was your favorite book of all time.
Yeah,
that's
and it's tough. It's tough to really make the comparison because of where they lie in the series. Shadow Rising has a different structure to it and has like a more completed, like concentrated character arcs, throughout it from beginning to end. Whereas this book is very much a middle of the series book. It's taking existing conflicts and character arcs and bringing them to their conclusions. So it's tough to compare in that way. But I had more fun reading this book than I did reading The Shadow Rising a few months ago. And that's saying a lot because I love The Shadow Rising.
Yeah. I know how much you love that book. I, of all people, know how much you love that book.
So that's just what I wanted to leave it at. Pat?
It's kind of anticlimactic in a sense, leaving me to
That's what I said earlier. Like, how the fuck do you follow up on that?
A lot of my thoughts echo yours. A large part of my imaginative landscape was built with the Wheel of Time, and I might not make use of it as an author, but it still has a very, very large impact on my life to this day. And the series has given me a great many fond memories. A great many. It's impossible to overstate, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's because of the Wheel of Time that this podcast exists. That's how I met Drew.
You guys kind of said it all, so I will propose a toast to Robert Jordan.
To Robert Jordan.
James Oliver Rigney Jr. Thank you very much for what you gave us.
If any of you listeners right now have dry throats and dry eyes, question whether you have a soul.
And
I mean, mine are kind of dry, but I'm in a...
On that note, I think it is time for the final draft.
I do.
Rob,
I do. And I'll kick us off because I have the amusing choice I went for this week. But I have to tell a story first. Lend me thine ears, boys and girls, because I have good news and I have very, very bad news. So I discovered 5-6 days ago now what is the single most delicious brew I have ever graced my tongue with.
Oh.
I have never tasted anything in terms of beer or anything that can be even loosely considered beer as delicious as this was. It's called, this is from Double Trouble Brewing Company. It's a 6.3% IPA from, it's called Hops and Robbers Pineapple IPA.
Okay.
That's what it is here. And it's got a big old fancy yellow container. It's got a lot of interesting artwork, lots of contrast on it. It was the pineapple, obviously, that drew my eye at first, besides the witty name, Hops and Robbers. I loved that. And it was the single best thing I've ever tasted. Like, wow. Not ever tasted, but as far as beer goes, like, it was ambrosia. It was amazing. I love pineapple. So, now for the bad news. In the past, I've been getting, I think I've mentioned this on Final Drafts previously, but I've been getting a lot of hangover symptoms just from very, very small amounts of beer compared to how much, for example, whiskey I like to drink. Drew, you might have actually suggested at one point that I might be allergic or intolerant of hops. And I'm pretty sure my stepdad has proposed that same thing as well, that I may be allergic or supposedly intolerant of hops in some way, because within 90 seconds of finishing this beer, it came back up.
Oh
No.
Projectile. It came straight back up and straight back out. My stomach hit that hard no button. And I mean, I had just finished cleaning the kitchen, so it was like the sink was nice and clean and pristine. It was just beer. It was just beer. It was like literally pouring a beer into the sink, because it had been that soon after I finished that beer. My stomach went, oh, no, and just ejected it immediately.
Oh my gosh.
So I discovered what I found was the most delicious beer I've ever had in my 28 years of life, and my stomach very vehemently disagreed.
A cruel fate.
Indeed.
A very cruel fate.
I am. I'm so devastated by that, because this was so good. It was so good. The pineapple. I mean, even like when I was sitting there afterwards, going, "Oh my god!" And I had like a little burp, and it's like, pineapple. It's so nice. It was such a good beer.
Man.
But that's from Double Trouble Brewing Company. Hops and Robbers, Pineapple IPA. If you can tolerate hops, I would highly recommend that one.
At least it can still taste good on the way back.
It was like drinking.
So there you go.
I'm telling you, it was seconds. It was like a minute after I finished drinking it.
Damn.
Wow.
Granted, I didn't slam it. It took me 2 or 3 minutes to drink, 5 minutes to drink,
Sure.
but still.
Okay.
Well,
Pat, what have you been drinking?
an old classic for an old classic.
Okay.
Sippin' Pretty from Odell Brewing. No, I've had that on the podcast many times. But
Sippin'
it's
Pretty. Yeah,
it's a staple
I think
of
I
mine,
remember
though.
chuckling over the pun.
The good old pinkish colored fruit sour.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So,
Drew?
So I am drinking something special today. This is the only bottle I have of it. It's the only bottle I'll ever get of it. This is a dark sour ale from New Belgium Brewing Company. It's a dark sour brewed with cocoa nibs, cocoa husks, and coffee, and bottled on nitro. So, like, nitrous oxide, very smooth, fine bubbles, creamy character. And, a sour chocolate coffee ale. Very strange, delicious. It really blew me away when I had this for the first time, because I was not expecting it to be very good, and it was excellent. But I had to break it open for this episode, because this is the last purely Robert Jordan book. It deserved a special beer. And even more so, because the title of it is perfect for the themes of the climaxes at the end of this book. This beer is called Exquisite Extraction.
Ooh. That one tickled me pretty. I like that.
This is a book that sees the extraction of Fail from the Shido captivity, the extraction of Elaine from the hands of the Black Ajah, the extraction of Matt's army and forces from the grip of the Shido, or the Shanshan rather, the extraction of Tuon from the danger presented by Elbar and Surath, and especially the Matt points. There is no better word than exquisite for what Matt pulls off against the Shanshan in the second half of this book.
I love it.
It's a very
Nice.
high level kind of a pun, but
I love it. How many connections it's able to make, though. You're right. It's absolutely a theme for what's happening at the end of this book and where it's going, where it's aiming us for our ending from Brandon Sanderson.
Indeed.
all right.
And so, this has been episode 58 of the Inking Out Loud podcast.
Yeah, buddy.
Next up, we are diving straight into The Gathering Storm. We will be reading up through the first 25 chapters, ending with chapter 25, In Darkness. We will be having a special guest on that episode as well, so keep an eye out for that. If you want to get early access to it, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/inkingoutloud. In addition to early access, some of our other tiers give you, Rob and I post short fiction or excerpts from novels every month. You can get access to our bonus short episodes on general fantasy science fiction topics or short stories or novellas. You can request a book for us to read. We just covered the first Witcher book at the request of one of our supporters, and coming up in a few weeks, we're going to do Dragonwind, the first book in the Deathgate cycle. As always, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey. With me is my co-host, Rob Santos.
Yep.
And our special guest and sound engineer, Patrick McCaffrey.
Pleasure as always, gentlemen.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.